Today in this vid I'm going to give you a couple quick tips right away on how to maintain the gel coat on your composite, or in this case Kevlar canoe or kayak. If you're going to own a craft with gel coat on it, you're going to have to do this on a pretty regular basis, if not yearly, on a bi-yearly basis. When you're mixing up your gel coat to repair your canoe, just mix up a ½ ounce, maybe an ounce at the most of the time, just enough to work with. And when you're applying, don't brush, just put a little bit on the end and dab. Think dab, not brush. That's why I like these foam brushes the best. They're perfect for applying the gel coat that way. On your first coat, put it on light, and then apply your second coat 24 hours later. And then sand and add your sealant or gloss. Fixing your scratches and cracks on your composite or Kevlar canoes is pretty easy, and it's important too. I like to do it every year or every other year. I just dab it on, putting on 2 coats, letting it dry thorough, and then I sand it down flat. And then I'll put my gloss or gel coat on. The biggest issue with letting the cracks and scratches go is that moisture will get in between the gel coat and your composite, and it'll actually do more damage as time goes by. But the main theme of this vid is going to be how to replace the wood gunnels on your canoe. And at first I wasn't going to put this up because this is such a small amount of people out there that even would attempt this. And that's probably smart, because this is not a basic skill. In almost all cases that I found, the only examples of DIY gunnel replacement on canoe showed putting a deck plate on top. And that is a much more simpler way than what I'm showing you here with this apex and the inserted deck plate. But I believe this is superior. Not only does it look better, but it's a stronger application. The deck plate, of course, makes it a lot less work, because you can hide, different cuts in here, things that may not look good, by putting a deck plate over it to cover it. And that's really why I think most people do it that way. It is simpler. This is a little more difficult, takes a little more skill, and I just couldn't find anything on it, so I decided it was worth my time to fire up the camera and kind of put this up today. There may be one other guy out there 5 years from now that may want to search this and find it. But also, if you find a canoe, some of these canoes are very expensive. In this case, I'm working on a Bell Magic, which is considered one of the best solos out there. They're selling right now for $2,500. So if you find one in disrepair where the gunnels have gone bad on it, you might be able to pick it up for a cheap price and repair it yourself and save yourself a lot of money. To replace, just to give you an idea, to replace wood gunnels on a canoe like this is usually $600 to $800. I've already completed half the canoe. I've got these 2 gunnel sides put in and that deck plate installed. I still have to do finish sanding to make it look right, and I'll probably reinforce the under the deck plate with some adhesive, but for the most part I'm done with half of this. This is the side that I'm going to show you. I've just got it clamped up here about halfway down. Let's pretend for a minute that I'm starting from the beginning and nothing is installed yet. The first thing you want to do is pick which side you're going to work on first. You should have your outside gunnel and your inside gunnel. Put them together evenly and then find the middle. Then find the middle of your canoe. Once you find the middle of your canoe, clamp it right in the middle. Now you're going to find most of these instructions pretty easy, and this actually should be a pretty short video, because it's not that complicated, but the devil is really in the details with this. If you don't do it right from the beginning, you're going to mess it up. You can easily split this gunnel. You could be 95% done and totally wreck the project. Starting in the middle is key. Then get the rest of your clamps, and we're going to clamp it all the way to the end. Here's my clamp in the middle. I've got it clamped up until the point where I just can't bring it down to the top of the Kevlar anymore. Now I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same thing on the other side, but I'm not going to be able to clamp as far up on this side because one of these ends is overlapping the bottom. Now what I did was just take an old piece of the old gunnel, and with each of the screw holes on each end, and I made a mark following this from screw to screw, and just put a mark and a mark and kept going down and I marked off the whole pattern. You do not want to use the old holes, so you want to be off a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch, or you know, a whole inch, whatever you want, but just make sure you're not going into the same pattern of the old holes. You want to use new holes for strength. I was going to use the same holes at first or try to match it up, which would be, you know, a difficult process on its own, but after talking to Northwest Canoe once again, they recommend using new holes for strength. So I've got my points marked off all the way to the bow, and I've got 4 clamps that I'm working with. Clamps, you got to have a lot of clamps to do this job as well. I'm going to hopscotch these all the way to the front. I got my angle drill, which really makes this a lot easier, and I got that marked off with tape as well. And I just kind of eyeball it in the middle. That works for me. And I'm also going to countersink it with a with just a regular drill bit. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you'd have to get a you know, a countersink drill bit to work with. I'm pretty comfortable with it, just drilling a little bit in there. You have to have it to where the hole for the countersink fits the drill bit head. If it's any less than that, you stand the chance of splitting this wood and ruining the whole project, and it can happen real fast. And you also want to use wax to put it in. I've seen a lot of tips, everybody alluding to using soap. I really do not recommend using soap. Wax is really the only thing to use when you don't want to split the wood. And the reason why you don't want to use soap is soap has a lot of caustics in it, and eventually it's going to eat away at the very screw you're putting in there. Take my word for it, I've seen this happen. So use wax. I use a little plumber's candle to put them in there. I'll show you what I mean, and I'm going to go all the way to the bow with this. Once I get the holes drilled, like I said, I'll coat the screw with wax. This is an important step. I'll set my drill for the lightest slippage possible. And then I'll finish it up by hand. I just don't want to split this rail. And that's what we got, just like all the rest. Alright, this is where your eyeballing skills are important, so I hope you've been practicing that. This side's pretty easy. You line up the inner gunnel as close as you can to the Kevlar. This side's a little trickier because you got a long ramp coming up that you have to eyeball it. So try to get it again, the top one, as close as you can to the inner side, and then clamp them. And take your handy duty pencil here, draw a line there, draw a line on the other side as well. Okay, now I've got them clamped crisscross the opposite way, and again, following this ramp up, I'm trying to get it close to the Kevlar as best eyeballing as I can. The other side is right on, and you can also use these lines that you've drawn on the bottom one before to help you out. And that looks pretty close. I can adjust it a little bit, and then again, use your pencil and draw the lines on this side. Okay, take your clamp off and you basically got 4 lines. 2 lines on each gunnel. What you want to find is the apex to that diamond. So I'm going to take a straight edge, in this case a little piece of scrap wood. I'm going to put it at the bottom of the diamond to the top, and then I'll draw a line right down that straight edge. Okay, I've got the line drawn down the middle of both of those diamonds. That's your apex you're looking for. I just use a little cut saw. This is where accuracy is really important. If this isn't right, it's going to make everything else really hard. But if you do mess it up, there's nothing that, you know, a sander can't solve for you. But it's very important that you measure this right and get that line straight. Okay, when you're done, you should be able to clamp them together, and it should be pretty close. In this case, I did pretty good. I'm going to do some, you know, based upon what I see, I'll do some final sanding to make them fit right, and then we're going to go underneath and fit it into the front of the canoe. Don't worry about what the tip looks like, because you're going to shape that up with the sander. In fact, I kind of followed the old design of the Magic, and I'm not going to put a pointy end. I'll probably shape that up a little more or round it off, but that's as pointy as it's going to get. The important thing is it fits together. Okay, I sanded the insides of the cut ends down, and then I clamped it, and making sure that each gunnel is on the inside of the Kevlar, I'm marking it with a pencil. And I kind of went back and forth about this on how I should do this. I thought about cutting into the Kevlar itself to let this gunnel out, but then I called Northwest Canoe, and he says there's no advantage to that. In fact, you're just weakening your Kevlar. You can always put more wood on, but it's a lot harder to patch Kevlar. So he recommended not doing that. In fact, the original way this was done by Bell is to cut a notch into the gunnel so it fits down on top of it, and that's what I'm going to do with this. Now, to cut the notches underneath the gunnels, I'm using a Dremel with a metal cutting disc. So it does get kind of hot underneath there and it scorches it, but you know, I couldn't see spending 15 bucks for the wood cutting disc just to make those small cuts. This seemed to work fine on the other one. I also use this to kind of clean up the end as well, so it's easier to fit it on. This is probably one of the more stressful parts of this process for me. So I just keep putting it in and checking, cutting, putting it in and checking until I get it right and as close to the wall of the Kevlar as possible. And that's cut pretty good. Now, if you're really, really good, you won't have to do any sanding or cutting to make it fit. But if you're like me, you'll have to get the Dremel out, cut a little off underneath, and get the sander out and sand a little more just to make it fit. And I'll tell you what, I'd rather be a little heavy than under and be loose. I was able to just fit this in using a rubber mallet and pounding it into place, and it's really tight. Again, don't worry about the ends because you're going to cut that off anyway. I'll give you an undershot here, how close that is, and there's always a little space there. And again, I'm going to fill that in, but that's originally how it was done, and that's how Northwest Canoe recommends it as well. So I've got a couple clamps in to secure it, and then I've got my deck plate. So I'm going to put the insert in, and I did have to sand this down a little bit, but it's best to insert this before you start tightening it down. My gunnels are thicker than the original that were put on, so I've got to kind of customize this deck plate to it, but I still want it to be pretty tight when it goes in there. Once I get this done and I'll clamp down, I'll make 3 marks. One for a screw here, one for the screw here, one for the screw here. Okay, I got my hole drilled into the deck plate from the gunnel. I got my screw waxed. Get that started. Okay, getting that first one in is the hardest one, it seems. Just trying to get the clamps around everything to keep the gunnels tight before you put the screw in is crucial. Okay, there's the 3 deck screws. Now we're going to do the end screw. The end screw goes through the outside gunnel, through the hull, and then through the inside gunnel. And it's just to give it that last bit of support onto the end of the gunnels themselves. So we got our 3 deck screws, and then we got our final end screw. And again, it's really nice to have this piece of wood on here. Don't cut that off until you put on that final end screw. That gives you something to hold on to, even to put some pressure on to keep the gunnel close to the deck. So that side's done. Now I can safely cut that off, then bring the other one up, clamp this gunnel on, the last one, and begin the same process. And that was the last turn of a screw for this project. Again, nicely lined up, matching the screws on the other side of the deck. I did like the look of this, although I came to my senses thinking that won't be very practical long term. I thought that was pretty cool on a canoe. We're going to cut that off though and leave the stock nub, and then I've got a lot of finish sanding to do. I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm sure that anybody that's gone this far knows how to finish sand. That will also help cover up any imperfections. Sawdust will fall into any cracks if there are any, and then I'll oil it up nice for preservation. I'm going to leave that a little longer than stock, but I kind of like it. It'll give me a handle to hold on to. That finishes at least the hard part of putting gunnels back on a canoe. This is what the old gunnel looked like. It was pretty rotten. Probably, a couple years I stretched this out than I should have. But this is fully restored. I hope this lasts another decade. And I know that there's a small amount of guys that might even attempt this. You know, it's going to be a niche group out there that want to do projects like this on this level. But if there is that one guy looking for the info, well, he's got this project up. This is the first time that I've ever replaced the gunnels on a canoe. First time I've ever had to, and it certainly saved me a lot of money. I think I already mentioned that gunnels on a canoe replacement cost would be $600 to $800. I'm going to leave Northwest Canoe Company website down below in the info box as well, in case somebody's looking for that kind of info. I did purchase the gunnels from them, and those were about $150, $175, I believe. And you will get to see this when it's finished. You'll probably see it in future vids when I'm out paddling on the water with it. I have to laugh a little bit because the only common theme to my channel is DIY. Otherwise, I'm all over the board. I do cooking vids that attract people that like to cook, and I do vids that attracts people that like the smell of diesel. I mean, it's from one extreme to the other. I used to do gun vids too, and ballistics, but that just seems to attract too many of the idiots on YouTube, so I stopped doing that. The one thing I can say that with my channel and the DIY theme is that it attracts that kind of person to my channel, and more I'm enjoying that. I've managed to filter a lot out, and I appreciate everybody that watches these vids, and I hope they're helpful. This is the first time I've done a DIY that I haven't done before, or many times before. This is the first time I've ever put gunnels on this, but you know, I did my research, and with previous experience working with wood and putting on trim, I think all helped to make this a success. So I hope this helps somebody. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later, and hopefully I'll have a vid up of me on the water with this soon.